This is the all-new 2020 Lincoln Aviator. Now, if you think back to the early 2000s, well, there was such a thing as a Lincoln Aviator. But that version, well, it was just kind of a spruced up version of the then current Ford Explorer. Now, the second generation Aviator is also a spruced up version of the Ford Explorer, but Lincoln has put a tremendous amount of effort to differentiate it from its donor vehicle, and you can tell definitely, absolutely, just by the styling. This thing looks elegant, powerful, civilized, all rolled into one. Love that Lincoln signature line between the rear tails. The best angle, however, is profile, where I love how the roofline kind of slopes back and tapers down. It's really, really cool. It reminds me of the Range Rover Velar. It works beautifully on this. The proportions are top-notch. Love the long, flat, tall hood and the front end. Now, this is a new face of Lincoln, and if they all end up looking like this, then Lincoln may have a chance. If they all drive this way, even more so. I'll tell you a little bit more about that very shortly. Now let's do the usual tour. Now don't go searching in the middle for the button, because there's a camera there, so it's right over here. Power hatch. Now that opens up to a boot that is fairly large. With the rear seats down, loads of space. I don't have the exact numbers, but it works out quite nicely. If you want to get an idea of how that works with the third row in place, still a fair amount of space. Love that power third row. I'm going to put it back down. Okay. So, in the second row, this is the full 7-seat configuration because you can get a version with captain seats. Before I slide in, there's something going on here with the textures and the materials. This is like a piano black, very smooth surface, but it's kind of got a little bit of orange peel in there. The grills for the Revel audio system, quite nice. This is like a faux leather, it's okay. This leather is fine. And then you kind of come down here and, well, that's kind of self-explanatory, semi-unfortunate. But what isn't unfortunate is the amount of room back here. Now, the seat is in the comfort actuation mode, so it slides back when the vehicle is off, but even so, there's still a fair amount of leg room. Even more headroom, despite the presence of the enormous sunroof. Great elbow room, and you can easily sit 3 across in here. It works out quite nicely. This is a lovely touch. If the vehicle is running, that's your touch screen HVAC controls. Lincoln does a thing where they don't do door handles or pulls or whatever they do. Buttons, which I kind of think are very cool, as long as they don't fail. Oh, here's another touch, part of a package. Very, very nice. Now up front is obviously where everything really happens. But again, the textures are okay, the stitching here is good, and then, again, unfortunate. But thankfully, you get these crazy 30-way power adjustable seats. They are as comfortable as they look. I mean, look, you can tell how many actual cushions are adjustable. All of them are, in fact. Even this one, the middle one, it extends and raises independently. The controls are right here. So let's slide in. Now, there's something called Lincoln Welcome. I think I'm getting that right. I should have checked my notes. But see, this is the calm screen. You can configure that to give you all kinds of information and different displays. This is a very classic Lincoln display, and I have to admit, I really like it. They've done a lot of work on the dashboard. See, this is where all the really nice materials come together. This is actually padded. The screen sits proudly up top here, which is typical nowadays. There's loads of space, a lot of space for everyone. Storage too. I do like the HVAC controls. Somehow, physical buttons are still the way to go, and I'm going to assume that that has to do with the average age of the buyers. This is your push-button transmission controls, which you have to remember are there. I occasionally forget, even after 2 days of driving. Storage, decent storage, loads of storage. Really, really love it for that. Now, they did put a lot of emphasis and effort into the steering wheel. Look how minimalistic it is. I love that there are only very limited controls in here, and there are some down here which you can't really see, but they are there. This is the actual push. Can you see that? That's the on-call or the voice command prompt button, which is an intelligent spot because apparently most people drive with only one hand on the steering wheel, typically their left. But if you actually drive and when you turn the wheel, I've accidentally activated it a few times. It's a detail, I suppose. But about details, the interior is quite nice. I have to give it thumbs up. It comes together very nicely. There's the button again. Yes, and that's the orchestra. All right, so this is the Aviator. Very handsome, well appointed generally speaking, and the driving experience is as good, at least as good. So it takes a while, okay? I'm used to this or that, push button transmission. But to be quite honest, it's probably one of the best ways to lay out your transmission shifter, if you will, because it's out of the way. I say too many things. All right. The first thing that comes to the surface when you're driving the new 2020 Aviator is the weight, the girth, the substance. I swear it feels like you're sitting on a tank in some really comfortable seats. And that's something that most luxury SUV buyers want. That sense of substance, that sense of safety, of luxury, of being isolated from the road surface and the nasty environment in which we live. And if you do need to make a quick getaway, well, Lincoln's got you covered there too. The standard engine in the Aviator is a twin turbocharged 3-liter V6, which produces 400 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. Now, I just mentioned that weight, right? That girth. This thing feels quick, nowhere near fast, but I suspect that the Grand Touring version, the plug-in hybrid version, the version with 494 horsepower and 630 pound-feet of torque, will feel a little quicker despite the added girth that will come with the battery and the whole hybrid system. Attached to the 3-liter V6 is a standard 10-speed automatic transmission, which I must say has performed flawlessly thus far. We've driven through some beautiful hilly sections of the Charlevoix area in Quebec. We've driven through some villages, and no matter what I asked of it, if I put the hammer down or off throttle or just coast, it's always in the right gear, or if it needs to downshift, it will do so at the drop of the throttle. Speaking of dropping the throttle, if you're like me and you like to drive, well, slightly quicker than the posted speed limit, well, Lincoln's got you covered with a number of drive modes. Normal, the one I'm in right now, happens to be the best balance, the one that'll give you some handling, some power, a lot of comfort. But if you want a little bit more excitement in your life, you can select Excite, which is essentially Lincoln's version of Sport. It sharpens up the dampers and the air suspension, which is an option. I will touch on that in a moment. Throttle response and transmission are just a little bit more eager to please and deliver the power, the performance, and the handling. You can use Conserve, which is Lincoln speak for eco, but I've not tested it at all. I know I do that occasionally, what can I say? There are also two other versions, one being Slippery for, I guess, snowy conditions, and the other one, Deep Doo-Doo, or Deep Conditions for when things get bad, although I can't imagine very many people will go seriously off-roading in their 2020 Lincoln Aviator. Now, about the suspension. The standard setup is adaptive dampers with steel springs. Every vehicle that we've tested over the last couple of days has included the dynamic handling package, which involves the adaptive dampers and an air suspension setup. As with 95% of all other vehicles with which an air suspension is available, you have to take it. It transforms all of those vehicles into hyper-capable vehicles. They can all handle, they can all deliver comfort, and they can raise themselves or lower themselves depending on speeds or driving conditions. Again, with a normal driving condition, or drive mode I should say, there's a sufficient amount of plushness, of comfort, while driving at lower speeds and even at higher speeds. If you want to throw it into a switchback and, you know, have a little bit of fun in a curve, it'll handle it beautifully. The real issue, excuse me, with the Lincoln Aviator is the price. Starting price is $69,000, which makes some sense. Now, if you are to option out your vehicle like this one in particular, you're looking at $87,000, which includes the $9,000 202A package, which is Ford speak for how they put together all kinds of packages and options. And that's $87,000. I have to admit, it's a little bit of a hard sell. This puts the Aviator among big players. BMW X5 if you don't need a third row, a Porsche Cayenne if you want the third row, a Volvo XC90 or an Audi Q7. That's some serious competition. If I have to add one little thing to that, it might be a little bit more expensive than the Cadillac XT6, but I think it's a far more advanced and interesting product. So on that level, amongst the Caddy Lincolns, yeah, I think this is probably a more interesting option. Compared to the Germans and the Swedes and perhaps the Japanese, not convinced it's the better option. It's interesting, but I'm not convinced it's the better option.